The plane fell from the sky like a bird with broken wings. There was fire, screams, smoke that swallowed everything. And then darkness. When Emily opened her eyes, she was alone on the forest floor. Her arm bleeding, her head spinning. She was only 14. The crash had taken her parents. The rescue team said she was the only one who made it out alive. "You're the last survivor," they told her. "You're lucky to be alive." But Emily didn't feel lucky, because her little sister, Hope, just 9 years old, was still missing. They never found her body. No shoes, no clothes, no sign. They told Emily to let go, to heal, to move on. She tried, until the 7th night in the hospital, when she heard it. A soft voice outside the window, barely a whisper. "Emily." She froze. It wasn't a nurse. It wasn't a dream. It was Hope, calling her name from the woods, just beyond the hospital garden. Emily jumped out of bed, heart pounding. "Hope," she called into the night. No answer, only the wind. But the next night, the voice came again. And the next, 7 nights in a row, always the same voice, always from the trees. They told her it was trauma. They said her mind was making it up. But Emily knew her sister's voice like she knew her own. And something inside her whispered the truth. Hope didn't die in that crash. Emily couldn't ignore it any longer. On the 8th night, while the hospital was quiet and the nurses were busy, she slipped out of bed. Her bare feet hit the cold floor. Her heart was beating fast, but her hands were steady. She wrapped herself in a coat, grabbed a flashlight from the supply closet, and crept outside. The moon lit a path to the trees, the same woods where she heard Hope's voice. She stood at the edge of the forest, flashlight shaking in her hand. "Hope," she called, her voice trembling. "It's me, I'm here." Silence. Then, "Emily." It came from deep inside the trees. Soft, sad, but real. Emily stepped into the woods. Branches snapped under her feet. Leaves brushed her arms. The air was colder here, heavier. She followed the sound, deeper and deeper, until the lights of the hospital were gone behind her. Everything was dark. Then the flashlight flickered. "No," Emily whispered. She tapped it. The light came back, but only for a second. Then it went out completely. She was alone in the dark. And that's when she heard it. A giggle. Not loud, not happy. A quiet, broken giggle, like something pretending to be her sister. "Come find me," the voice whispered. Emily spun around. "Hope, where are you?" No answer, just the sound of footsteps, not hers. Something or someone was walking in the dark, and it was getting closer. Emily stood frozen in the dark. The air around her felt colder now, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. She listened. 1 step, 2 steps, crunch, crunch. Something was walking in a slow circle around her. Then came the voice again. "Emily, I'm scared. Come help me." But something was wrong this time. The voice sounded too flat, like someone was copying her sister's voice, not speaking from her heart. Emily's fingers dug into her coat. "If that's really you, Hope, tell me what I said to you before the flight." Silence. A long, awful silence. Then, "You said not to touch your cookies." Emily's eyes widened. That wasn't what she said. Before the flight, they'd hugged tightly at the airport gate. She remembered whispering, "No matter what, I'll always hold your hand." Whoever or whatever was in the woods didn't know that. Suddenly, something darted through the trees. Fast, tall, too tall. The wind howled, twisting the branches. Leaves flew in all directions. Emily turned to run, but her foot caught a root and she fell hard. She hit the ground with a gasp, dirt filling her mouth. Then, soft fingers touched her hand. Small, familiar. "Emily," whispered a tiny voice. "Don't believe the one that sounds like me." Emily looked up, and in the shadows beside her stood her real sister. Emily gasped. "Hope." The girl nodded slowly, her eyes wide and filled with tears. She looked thinner, older than 9, but it was her. That face, that crooked little smile, she always made when she was scared but trying to be brave. "It's really you," Emily whispered. Hope clutched her hand tightly. "We have to go now." Behind them, the trees groaned. A deep, low growl rumbled through the woods. Not from an animal, not from anything Emily could name. "What is that?" she asked, her voice shaking. Hope's lips trembled. "It followed me from the crash." Emily helped her sister to her feet. "But they said no one survived. How did you even get here?" Hope looked over her shoulder toward the dark. "I was thrown from the plane. I landed in a tree. I waited for help, but it never came. Something else did." Emily grabbed her hand tighter. "What came?" Hope whispered, "The thing that walks like people but isn't." Suddenly, from deep in the trees, they heard it again. "Emily." That same too-perfect voice. Sweet, hollow, imitating. "I found her too, but you can leave her. I can keep her warm, like I did before." Emily pulled Hope close. Don't listen, run. They ran. Branches clawed at their arms and faces. Roots tried to trip them. But they didn't stop, not even when the thing began to scream. A sound like wind being torn apart. A sound like grief and fire and teeth. Emily saw the edge of the woods, the hospital lights faint through the trees. We're almost there, she cried. Then she felt it. Cold fingers brushing the back of her neck. Emily didn't look back. She couldn't. She knew if she saw what was behind her, she might not run at all. Keep going, she shouted, pushing Hope forward. They burst through the last wall of trees, falling hard onto the edge of the hospital garden. Dirt, grass, light. Hope gasped for air beside her. Clutching her side, her knees were scraped. Her face streaked with dirt, but she was real, warm, alive. Emily turned back toward the woods. The trees stood still now, unmoving. No voice, no growl, no sound at all. Just a thick line of shadow that seemed to breathe. Like the forest itself was alive and watching. The nurses rushed out moments later, shouting their names. Flashlights beamed in every direction. Emily, are you okay? Where have you been? Emily held Hope close, trembling. She's alive, my sister's alive. The nurses stared in confusion. Emily, that's not possible. But Hope lifted her head. I was in the woods, she said softly. I tried to come back, but something else always came instead. The doctors didn't know what to say. Neither did the police when they questioned them later. There were no footprints in the forest, no sign of anything chasing them, just twisted trees and cold silence. But Emily knew what she'd seen, and what she'd felt breathing down her neck that night. Hope slept beside her in the hospital room that night, safe for the first time in 6 long years. But Emily couldn't sleep, because when the lights were off and the world was quiet, she heard it again, from the edge of the dark woods outside the window, a whisper in her exact voice. I'll be back for both of you. Emily sat up in bed, her eyes locked on the dark treetops swaying outside the hospital window. She didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't move, until Hope stirred beside her, mumbling in her sleep. Emily reached over and squeezed her hand. I'm here, she whispered. You're safe. But her heart knew better, because that voice, the one that had whispered in her exact tone, wasn't a dream, it wasn't her imagination, it was real. And it remembered them. The next morning, they were moved to a secure floor. Doctors, reporters, detectives, all wanted answers. Hope barely spoke. Emily didn't say everything, only enough to prove her sister was alive and had somehow survived. But she left out the thing in the woods. The voice, the cold hand, the growl that echoed like 1,000 broken screams. They wouldn't understand, and she didn't want to risk it following her out. But it was already too late. That night the hospital power went out. Just for a minute, just long enough for the hallway lights to flicker, the monitors to beep, the staff to panic. Emily grabbed a flashlight and checked on Hope, still sleeping peaceful. Then she heard it. Outside the door, a soft knock, then a voice clear as glass. Emily, I'm scared, it's me, Hope, I can't find you. Emily froze. She looked at her sister, still lying in bed, breathing slowly. The voice at the door knocked again. Please open the door, I want to come in. Emily stepped forward, her chest rising and falling. She pressed her ear to the door. No breathing, no footsteps, just the voice. If you don't open it, I'll have to find another way in. Then silence, until a whisper came from the window behind her. I told you I'll be back. Emily spun around, flashlight shaking in her hand. The window was closed, but fog had crept across the glass. Thick and slow, in the center, something had drawn a message with a fingertip from the outside. 3 simple words. Let me in. Emily's breath caught. Hope stirred in bed again, her eyes fluttering open. Emily, she whispered. S-H-H-H, Emily said gently, walking toward her. Don't look at the window, don't move. But Hope was already sitting up. She turned and froze. Her lips trembled. It followed me. Emily nodded slowly. It was never after just one of us, was it? Hope shook her head. It likes sisters. It likes voices. It waits until people forget. Then softly from the fog beyond the glass came the sound of laughter. But not cruel, not loud. It was familiar. Emily's voice, laughing. Hope covered her ears. It learns us. Emily, every word, every thought. The lights flickered again. And then, bang, the window cracked, spiderweb lines racing across the glass. A long, dark shadow pressed against it from the outside. It had no eyes, no face. But it smiled wide and wrong, because it didn't need a face. It had theirs. Emily ran to the door, throwing it open. The hallway was dark, no nurses, no footsteps. Only red emergency lights glowing dimly above the exit sign. Come on, she yelled to Hope. They ran barefoot, cold, afraid. Behind them, the window shattered. The creature had found a way in. They ran down the dark hallway, the cold floor slapping under their feet. Hope clutched Emily's hand, tears streaking her face. Behind them, something moved, fast, quiet. The emergency lights flickered as they passed, painting everything red for a second, then black. "Where are we going?" Hope cried. "There's a chapel at the end of the east wing," Emily said. "They said it was the oldest part of the building. Stone walls, no windows." Hope's voice trembled. "You think it can't follow us there?" "I don't know," Emily whispered. "But we need somewhere it can't see us." They reached the chapel doors and pushed them open with all their strength. It was small, empty. The air smelled like candles and dust. A large wooden cross hung on the wall. The stained glass windows were cracked, but glowing faintly in the storm's light. They slammed the doors shut and pushed a bench in front of them. Hope collapsed to the floor, shaking. "Why won't it stop?" Emily sat beside her, heart racing. "Because it wants to finish what it started." Hope looked up, pale. "It didn't crash the plane." "No," Emily said slowly, "but it was already in the forest. And when the plane went down, it saw us. It chose us." Hope covered her mouth. "It was never an accident, was it?" Suddenly, bang. The chapel door rattled once. Then again. Not loud, but enough to freeze them both. Then came the voice. This time it was their mother's. "Girls, are you in there? Open the door." "My loves, I've missed you so much." Emily's hand clenched tight around Hope's. "That's not her," she whispered. "It just sounds like her." Hope nodded, crying softly. "How do we make it stop?" Emily looked at the flickering candle on the altar. Then she looked at the stained glass window behind it, cracked, glowing and painted with two angels holding hands. And then a thought came to her. Maybe it could take voices, faces, but maybe it couldn't survive something stronger, something the two of them still had. A bond it couldn't fake. Emily stood slowly, pulling Hope to her feet. "We're not going to run anymore," she said, her voice firm but trembling. Hope looked up at her, confused. "Then what do we do?" Emily walked to the altar and grabbed the candle. Its tiny flame danced in the dark. She placed it on the floor between them and knelt down, motioning for Hope to do the same. "We do what it can't," she whispered. "We remember who we are." Hope knelt beside her. "Will that stop it?" Emily nodded slowly. "I think. It feeds on fear, on lies, on the things people forget. But you and me, we remember everything. The truth, the real love, it can't copy that." Outside, the voice changed again. Now it sounded like Emily. "Hope, open the door. I'm so scared. I need you." Hope squeezed her eyes shut. Emily took her hand. "What did I say to you the night before the crash?" Hope sniffed. "You held my hand. And you said don't let go, no matter what." Emily smiled through tears. "Exactly." Then both girls gripped hands across the candlelight, like they used to do when the power went out at home. Like they always did in the dark. The wind outside howled louder. The door creaked again. The creature hissed. "You don't belong together anymore." Emily shouted back. "Then come and take us." Silence, then a shriek, high and sharp, like every stolen voice screaming at once. The windows cracked deeper. The candle flickered wildly. But the sisters held on tighter. Emily whispered, "Remember the swings. How we used to scream when we flew too high." Hope laughed softly through her tears. "And how you always said you'd catch me if I fell." Outside, the creature screamed again. The sound turned from a roar into a broken gasp, and then into nothing. Just wind, just rain, and finally stillness. The candle settled. The doors didn't shake anymore. The voice didn't return. Hope looked at her sister. "Is it gone?" Emily nodded slowly, listening to the silence. "I think we starved it," she said. "We gave it nothing left to take." Emily and Hope stayed still for a long time, just breathing. The candle's flame danced gently between them, no longer wild, like the darkness had finally let go of them. Outside, the storm had softened to a steady rain. No more whispers, no more lies. Hope's voice was quiet. "Why us?" Emily looked at her. "Because we survived. Because we remembered each other." And maybe that made it angry. Hope looked down. "Do you think it'll come back?" Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Maybe, but next time it won't find us afraid." They stood and opened the chapel doors together. The hallway lights were back on. The hospital was quiet again, but normal. A nurse ran toward them in shock. "Where have you girls been? We've been searching all over." Emily didn't answer. She just hugged Hope close and whispered, "She's back, we're safe." Later that day, the doctors tried to ask questions. They brought in police, investigators, even a priest. Emily told them only part of the truth. About a voice in the woods. About something pretending to be her sister. About running through shadows and holding on to memories stronger than fear. They didn't believe most of it, but one old nurse did. She pulled Emily aside and said in a whisper, "There's stories about these forests. Old ones about creatures that don't need bodies, just a voice, just a name." Emily looked her in the eyes. "We didn't give it either." Hope slowly returned to her old self. She laughed more, slept more, started painting again. But sometimes when the sky turned gray, she'd get very quiet. And Emily understood, because sometimes she'd still hear it, faint and far away, when the wind moved just right. A soft echo of her own voice. But it never got close again. It only watched, and waited, because now it knew. The sisters had each other, and that was something even darkness couldn't steal. 1 year later, the woods were quiet. Sunlight spilled through the trees like golden ribbons. The air smelled like pine and wildflowers. Birds chirped, leaves danced on the breeze. Emily and Hope stood just beyond the edge of the forest, where it had all begun and nearly ended. Hope held a small jar in her hands. Inside were pieces of her drawings, things she'd drawn during her silent years. The ones she said were not really hers. Emily carried a tiny box with the melted remains of the chapel candle. They dug a hole together under the oldest tree and buried them both. A goodbye, a warning, a promise. "Do you think it still lives in there?" Hope asked. Emily looked into the trees. Her voice was calm. "Maybe, but it's smaller now." Hope tilted her head. "How do you know?" "Because we didn't feed it." They sat down, side by side, as they used to do as little girls. And for the first time in a long time, they weren't afraid of the silence. They were the story now. Not the shadows, not the lies. Them, two sisters, survivors, the ones who remembered, the ones who came back. And far away, deep in the forest, something ancient and hungry went quiet. Because it knew, its hold on them was finally gone.